Pokemon Scarlet and Violet very recently introduced the new move Sceptile, and in today's video I want to discuss with you guys my personal thoughts on this and how I think it'll end up actually impacting competitive and what Pokemon might even get it either in future generations or even in Scarlet and Violet if this doesn't end up being a signature move. If you guys enjoy this type of content and you want to see more like it, leave a like below and subscribe for more, and with that said, let's get into it. So obviously, we do have Drampa up here, though Drampa is just the placeholder for Cyclizar because it's a Dragon Normal type. But what Pokemon do I think will actually get it? So this will probably be extended to Pokemon that mostly have tails, obviously, because it's shed tail. Though there will probably be that one weird exception for a Pokemon that was completely tailless for its entire evolutionary line that has no reason to actually run this move. And I will say that I think the first Pokemon that will end up being the most likely Pokemon to actually take advantage of this is none other than Slowbro. Slowbro literally has several different Pokedex entries and history in a lot of the older games as tails related to the tails and them falling off. Now, whether it's in the Gen 7 games when they fall off naturally, or in stuff like in Heart Gold Soul Silver and in Gold Silver Crystal, where people actively just cut off Slowbro tails and sold them for more money than you could even make in the games at the time. But I think that the history behind Slowbro and them losing their tails does leave a lot to this Pokemon actually ending up getting the move Sceptile. I feel like it makes a lot of sense for the Pokemon, and a couple of different things I think could actually be really good on this. For one, we could just go with a massive stat pass set. That would assume, of course, that this does also pass stats instead of just substitute. If it does only pass substitute, this still does have the benefit of being a nice physically defensive mon that could take advantage of just the fact that it has Regenerator and getting back a third of its health when it's losing 50% to set the substitute up. Now, I will say that I think either way this could actually have some benefits. I think that the move would be insanely broken if it's just Baton Pass, but it's also passing a sub, even if it's only a 25% substitute and it's taking 50% because it's also giving the initiative and that's meant to be more of a punishment. I think either way, if it functions as a Baton Pass in that sort, it's going to be inherently a really broken move. And I only say that because currently Baton Pass actually does pass substitutes. So I think that it's not exactly that out there to rule this thought out, that it could end up passing stats as well. And I think that in that regard, if this is the route that it goes, Slowbro will be the best of the four Slow family evolutions, because of the fact that typically what I think will probably be passed is just specifically Iron Defense, and you'll throw on Shed Tail, and then probably an attacking move, and then something like most likely Slack Off, to be honest, if not a status like Toxic. So my personal guess is that will probably be the set should it end up functioning like Baton Pass. Otherwise, it's probably just going to take the place of Teleport, because it's slow enough to still pivot slower than nearly every other Pokemon besides Teleport users. And on top of it as well, passing a substitute into a really fast Pokemon, you could give them a turn to set up anyway. So I don't necessarily think that it'll be suddenly some really terrible move, even if it doesn't function as Baton Pass and it just passes the substitute. But I think that would help a lot. And that would make it, in my personal opinion, even like a terrifying move in Anything Goes, personally. And I think that Slowbro could actually even be an abuser of it in that tier. However, obviously, there would probably be a lot broken, like far more broken abusers than Slowbro, but it's one that's not to be overlooked. Because even on hard Baton Pass teams, this does still get not only Calm Mind, but also Iron Defense, which I think if you were to play with it in the Anything Goes tier, should it function like Baton Pass, you'd probably just see a dual stat passing Slowbro that would go for Iron Defense, Calm Mind, and then probably some sort of offensive move to not be Taunt Bait, and then Shed Tail. And it would just start Baton Pass chains, because it could pretty comfortably actually do that for a lot of special attackers. However, I do think that if it doesn't function like specifically Baton Pass, just also passing a sub does, I think a Slowking could actually be a pretty good abuser of this. I do inherently think that Slowking will be worse at this if it does function similar to the Baton Pass route, specifically because Slowbro has the advantage of boosting the physical defense at least, and it would be higher at least as far as an investment goes. Obviously, Slowking could still accommodate for that with Iron Defense. However, I think that unless it's passing to a Body Press user, this will typically be less sought after. Not only this, but I think that Slowking will still at least be better than the Galar forms. I think both of them to be, in fact. I think that Galar Slowking has solidified itself as an Assault Vest Pokemon, and I actually think that's probably going to be a role it would carry into future generations. And Galar Slowbro is such a far drop from the other three, I don't even think it's on the talking points as the same three of these. The point being, though, is I think that Galar Slowking will maybe find use with it, but probably not. Regular Slowking could be useful if it's not a Baton Pass move, and regular Slowbro would be even possibly usable in upper tiers, in my personal opinion. However, what are some other Pokemon that might end up getting this? Well, next up, I do have Grimstyle, and I mentioned this because actually all the forms do have tails. At the very least, I know that Morgrim has a pink tail, and Grimstyle has a few actually like black tails, and I think that you could maybe make the case that Grimstyle could get it. And I wanted to accommodate for Grimstyle because it's at least more fitting of Grimstyle and maybe shed its tails and regrow it, because in the same vein as like a fur sort of thing. Whereas with something like a Thundurus, you're obviously not going to see that, but this does accommodate for basically the Prankster route, for a Prankster Shed-Tail Pokemon. Now this could actually be a pretty terrifying option, because Grimstyle does get a lot of setup options such as Nasty Plot and Bulk Up, and I think this might even Calm Mind if I remember correctly. It does not. But even still, Nasty Plot and Bulk Up are two very terrifying options that you potentially pass, and should this end up functioning like a Baton Pass, this might even be one of the best abusers in my personal opinion. Being able to get the Prankster status up, the Prankster stat raises up, I should say, on top of also the Prankster Shed-Tail, once you've already set up into something else, you could potentially end up making it so you don't even lose the substitute at that point. Grimstyle also has a pretty nice HP stat, so 95 off of a max HP Grimstyle would basically be a 197 HP substitute should it just go the 50% route, and that also has a lot of merit. However, I think if it's just a Baton Pass specifically, while it might not be bad in Grimstyle, with it already having a bit of 4 Movie Slot Syndrome, I can't really see it being a primary option on it. I do think that if it's specifically just a passing move that doesn't actually pass stats, Slowbro will still be the best abuser of it, maybe even just on this list. However, there are a couple Pokemon I think that can maybe compete with it. If it is Baton Pass related though, Grimstyle is going to be a threat to watch out for certain. Next up though, we do have another Pokemon obviously. This is Garchomp, obviously, for everyone who knows it's Garchomp. It's one of the best Pokemon you've really run in OU currently, and it's been for a lot of generations. And I think Garchomp, if it does function as a Baton Pass route, even if Shed-Tail necessarily doesn't get banned, which it would, it objectively would, Garchomp would still be a really broken abuser of this, and would probably be one of the biggest defining factors to get the ban. Even if this does end up being allowable in Anything Goes, which it would for sure, Baton Pass regular is allowed there, but if you were to, let's say, see this in Anything Goes, and it does function as a stat passing move still, Garchomp could actually be one of the better abusers in my personal opinion. You'd be able to pass a Sword Stance, which could actually still outpace a lot of other dragons, and most of them would really have to run Scarf to get around you, barring like Lottie Twins, whether Mega or otherwise, and stuff like that. So with that in mind, Garchomp being able to actually pressure other dragons and then Baton Pass out on a bad matchup, maybe something like a Xerneas, you could potentially get a Sword Stance up into a Steel type and Shed-Tail that into maybe like a Duskmane Necrozma, which would typically not really run a setup move in Anything Goes unless it's running specifically like a 3-attack set. So in more defensive variants, you could actually get the offensive boost, which could be pretty cool. Though, especially if you were to also pass a Scale Shot into that, while you would take the defense shop as well, you could honestly set up for some really dangerous setup sweeps on other Pokemon, and I do think that's also pretty commendable for what Garchomp could end up doing. Now, I don't think this will be some meta-defining Pokemon in Uber, certainly not, even if it does function like a Baton Pass, but it could actually be a pretty terrifying one in my opinion. Even still, Garchomp still gaining a momentum move at all would actually be pretty amazing, because you could potentially use this to try and get Garchomp out of bad situations without having to hard swap. Albeit, I don't think there's a lot that would really benefit from this, but it could be something that you maybe pop a single turn in a game when running, let's say, a Scarf Garchomp, which typically only needs stabs and then a fire move of choice, or a rock move of choice. Typically it's fire move, but sometimes you see rock moves. The point being is that it could actually be a good option in Scarf Chomp, in my personal opinion. Next up though, we do Como. Como, I think, would really only be viable if it does function in the Baton Pass route, but otherwise I think it would be garbage. One thing I do want to mention though is this with Claiming Your Soul, I think could actually be nightmarish, because you could basically run a Citrus Berry set with this and then try and get Como's health up, and then pop a Clanger Soul sweep later in the game. Because even if you were to go for, let's say, the Clanger Soul into a Shed-Tail, you would lose 83% of your health. You would then pop a Super Berry and get another 25% back, and then bam, you are... Well, actually, I think it's 1/3 for the Super Berries. I actually do have to double check that. Yeah, Aguav, it's 33%. So you get yourself basically back up to just about half, which, while you couldn't necessarily pop another Shed-Tail reliably, without basically sacking Como, you could still end up actually getting off another Clanger Soul and get a late game sweep with that, which could actually be pretty incredible. Como still having base 75 HP, if you were to max this out and run a bulkier set, because this is now a Baton Passer, you'd get around like 170, 180 base sub, which is still really incredible. To put it in perspective, if we were to take a Blissey, right? And I should have actually used the Blissey example for the other ones, but they reach far higher with the 50% sub, because Blissey only having 75% can't actually do that. So Blissey at max HP though has 714 HP. If you divide that by 4, it's basically 178.5. So that would be, your substitute would be 178. If you were to take the Como right here and divide that by 2 for the even subs, you get 177. So this is pretty much the comparison of having a Blissey substitute up, but it would be passed into another Pokemon. And I do think that is actually something that is still pretty commendable, because Como could still do a lot of damage with running a Shed-Tail set, plus maybe Hazards, let's say, and then passing into some sort of setup sweeper. Could still actually be pretty cool. I just think it won't be actually a terrifying Pokemon without that, personally. But still something to keep in mind, obviously. Next up though, we do a Sceptile. Sceptile is one that I actually got suggested from from specifically the BBL server actually, where I had asked this question because a lot more of them were on at the time. But Sceptile is a pretty cool one, and I think it would actually fit thematically. We've even seen Mega Sceptile shoot off parts of its tail, so I don't think it would even be that crazy to think about. Not only this, but this typically ends up getting a lot of moves that other dragons do, such as Dragon Pulse and Scale Shot, so I wouldn't exactly be surprised to see Sceptile get Shed Tail, which Cyclizar, a Dragon-type Pokemon, gets, and I think it actually fit pretty well. This could be, again, similar to Garchomp, pretty cool on choice spec sets to try and pivot out of bad matchups, maybe like a defensive fire that would switch in, and then you aggressively bring in like a later Asterion. Albeit, to be fair, I did use later Asterion as an example. This will probably still not bring it to OU, but it could be kind of cool in like an RU setting in my personal opinion. Regardless though, I think a Sceptile could be a kind of cool user. Don't think it's going to suddenly be some OU Pokemon, but it could actually be a pretty interesting one to say the least. I do want to also bring up Dragonite, which, while I will say that Dragonite having multi-scale, probably not the one you really want to pop a Shed Tail on, it could end up being an interesting one. I mostly picked this because of the fact that Dragonite gets Shed Skin, and Dragonite still being a Dragon-Dance Pokemon, you could potentially send this into some other Pokemon that wouldn't necessarily be able to boost speed and offenses, and become pretty nightmarish, you know, maybe passing a Shed Tail into later Asterion or something. I don't think this would be some insane thing, but having the multi-scale happen first could help you actually keep above the 50% mark, and Dragonite still having over 91 base HP, well, over 90 base HP, I should say, makes it over the Blissey mark for potential Shed Tail subs. So even if it can't pass the stat, it could still be really abusable in my personal opinion. But maybe in terms of like a really niche set, to be fair, I don't actually know a lot of Dragonites that would really want to forego moves because they already do have a lot of different viable moves, but it's still something I thought that might potentially get it, and I did want to still cover it, even if I think that there are definitely better options. Finally though, I do want to cover Scrappy. So Scrappy is another Pokemon Shed Skin, and I do actually think that Scrappy could be an interesting one, even if it's not a Baton Pass sort of thing, where it's going to pass stats. Because Scrappy having Intimidate, I think this actually could be an amazing one for VGC, because if this was spread out to other Pokemon, personally I think this, or maybe Grimstyle, but Grimstyle also has a 4 moveset issue, but I think that you could actually see a case for Scrappy being a fairly viable Pokemon. You could, for example, with 65 HP, you'd be able to reach around the 334 mark, which at max, especially at level 50 it would be lower, but even still it's just under what a Blissey substitute normally would get, which is a lot of HP to be passing, obviously, as far as a substitute goes, because it's pretty unheard of. Even if it's only the 25%, it still does have some merit, because obviously if you were to pass a 25% substitute, you're still getting off a not terribly frail sub at the very least, and you'd be able to send this thing back out to then start Intimidate shuffling again, which could actually be amazing, especially with this also having a Fake Out potentially in its moveset, as long as it doesn't lose that native access for Generation 9. This Pokemon would have a lot going for it as far as doubles goes, and I personally think, as far as doubles users go of Shed Tail, this would probably be the most reasonable one that could get it, that would actually be viable in my personal opinion. Because I don't think that Grimstyle would reasonably fit in our moveset. Grimstyle has like 9 moves it could viably run. Maybe 1 in a million would run it, but I really don't see it happening a lot. Whereas Scrappy though, I think as far as doubles goes, would probably be one of the more viable options. We see that constantly every generation, most of the top 5 Pokemon are Intimidate users, and while I don't think Scrappy will break that ceiling, it's a Pokemon that's not exactly new to viability in VGC. We typically see it as a somewhat niche option, and I think a Shed Tail would actually bring a lot of life to this Pokemon. I really don't think it would be used in singles, unless it's maybe some like PU pass option, but even still, I think it would be very niche at best. But in doubles, I think this could end up being a terrifying option. But let me know what you guys think down below. As I said, I know not all these would necessarily be the most broken options. I try to keep it very tame, because the move itself is such a broken move. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think the move will function like Baton Pass? Do you think it's just going to pass sub? Do you think that sub number will be 50 or 25%? Or anything else regarding the move? Let me know down below, because I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoy this type of content and you want to see more, leave a like below and subscribe. Also, I'm starting up Wednesday Twitter discussion videos, so if you want to click on the link down below, you can actually respond and get involved in the discussion. This week's question is going to be asking, what Pokemon's type would you change to make it a dual type Pokemon? Whether you're adding on something to a single type Pokemon or just changing a dual type Pokemon's type. With that said, I'll see you guys next week for that video, or even Friday for another video going over another tier list. Until then, peace out guys.